Hi and welcome to Literati on News Central. I'm your host, Joseph Ike. On Literati, we talk to writers, producers, publishers, cultural journalists, anyone who's involved in the process of bringing these wonderful pieces of literature and helping to shape our narratives and tell our African stories our own way. With me today is the wonderful writer now. I mean, we should refer to you as writer. I mean, up until now, you've been known primarily as a businesswoman, Ms. Wonuola Okoye. Wonu has a degree in chemical engineering, but then a master's degree from the University of Birmingham in mechanical engineering. So you are really your ideal, so to speak, STEM woman. Core science and hard science. But then you moved from engineering into business. Started consulting, you've run a lot of successful businesses. And at the end of the day, there's something I like that you've been quoted as saying, you are particular about the business narrative of Africa. And that gave birth to the book we will be talking about today, The Startup Star, The Ultimate Guide for Startups, Big Startup by Wonuola Okoye. So thank you so much for being on the show with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. So like I said earlier, you are a core scientist, an engineer by training. How did we make that transition from engineering to business and then to coaching business and to writing this book?
Okay, so my story is a bit lopsided because a lot of people who study chemical engineering, well, I don't know, chemical engineers really feel like they can do anything. So you find a lot of chemical engineers who do the most random of jobs. So obviously I started with chemical engineering, did a master's degree in chemical engineering. I actually got a scholarship to go and study chemical engineering, which is great. However, when I was done, at the time, I was about 21 years old, and to be fair, I was really all about the money. And living in England, it was like, okay, so I'm gonna go for a 22K salary as an engineer, or a 40K salary as as an investment banker. And I chose the obvious path for me, which was, well, I really just studied chemical engineering at the time because I like math. I was good at math. I was good at chemistry, good at biology, good at physics, so it was obvious and intuitive for me to study that. However, how interested I was in those topics is another story entirely. So I moved into investment banking because I like the challenge. I really like to do things that I don't know anything about because I like to learn and know about as much information. I have as much information as I have about the world as possible. My general knowledge, I'm always trying to keep it on fleek, if you like. So I'm constantly reading about random things that I have no business reading and Googling about, right?
Which is why you're on the show anyway.
Potentially. So after doing investment banking for a while, I worked at Citibank, worked at HSBC, moved back to Nigeria, worked for Argental Capital, which is like Owando Capital. So we used to do a lot of fundraising for Owando, power projects, oil and gas projects, and so on and so forth. I really enjoyed, building business models, building financial models, doing the consultancy and, the management consultancy aspect of it, and just working with a completely different business every time. So we worked with businesses from, obviously in the finance sector to businesses in FMCG, to businesses in, in fashion, in art, in aviation. So it was always exciting to learn about new and interesting industries. So for me, a lot of people say, oh, you're in fashion or you're in this. And I'm like, I'm actually not really in anything specific. I'm just really somebody who enjoys business, enjoys starting businesses, enjoys, working with entrepreneurs, enjoying growing businesses, which, eventually led to me starting my own businesses. And incidentally, they were in fashion. So obviously we had the LPM, the Liberty Marché, and the Lespaces and the stores and the Maydays. And you know our story, we go way back. Okay. And then that obviously bred the Startup Star. That was it came to me in my sleep actually randomly because of all the businesses that I have worked with people to set up and had set up myself.
Okay, so now it seems like you're more intrigued by businesses, not particularly the sector that they exist in.
So, like I said, I like to increase my general knowledge. So any new interesting sector that I have no, idea about is always a good experience for me. I like to set up. So I like the beginning of businesses. So everything from figuring out what your brand identity is, what your business model is, your financial model. It's different every time, even though the process is pretty much repeatable. It's different with every single industry. So, with fashion, you're learning about completely different, matrices and aspects, but with an FMCG, for example, even though you have to go through the same process of figuring out what your brand identity is, what your business model is, it's always a different. Experience each time.
So let's talk about this book, Startup Star. Tell me about this. Why did you feel, you're out there, you're working with businesses, you're doing, because one of the things I like about the way the book is organized, it's almost like a workbook. And it's something, it seems to me like, and you're here so you could tell us a lot more, where you expect the entrepreneur to take this book and basically work out the details, because there's actually spaces for people to fill in the details as they work on this book. So where did this come from?
So initially, it was supposed to be a workbook, like a very short workbook for, ticking the boxes. Oh, I need to start my business. Here's a this is a list of things you need to do. Check, 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 check. But then as I started to write it, it just developed into something much bigger than I had initially anticipated. But essentially, what I want people to take away from the book is to not take it away, to always have it with them, as something that is guiding them through every single business process. I still refer to the book, when I'm working with entrepreneurs, I'm like, oh wait, I need to, what do we do next? Where do we start from? How do we do? So I go back to the book and I go, okay, this is what we do next, this is how we do it, this is the process we usually use, because it's very easy to forget, one, and like I said, it's always a different experience every time. So it's always good to sort of have a guide that help you go through these are the things that we need to actually do in order to achieve success in a business.
Now, it's funny you should mention the writing of the book and moving from a workbook style to this that we have here. I don't know if our viewers can see this, but we have sections that have like 30 days to the launch of your business, and it goes into, you have to fill out these things that you actually need to get done. And so, it's a very hands-on practical guide from that perspective. But for someone as busy as you are, you're working, you're running businesses, you're on the board of several businesses, you're advising, you're consulting, you are also a mother, you are every other thing that you are. Where do you find the time to write? And what's that process like?
To be honest, I shut down for like 2 months when I was writing this. Like I said, I started it literally in my sleep. I woke up one day and I heard whispers in my ear saying, oh my God, you need to put this together. Like in a concise way that makes it easier to digest. And the reason why I even consider that is because, like I said, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs and I started businesses myself. And it was always you'd always get to a point where even at the beginning, you're like, where do I go first? Which one is more important? At what point should I start doing this? And what comes next? What comes next? So that is how the book sort of started, and it evolved into whatever it was. And the reason why it ended up being a book was because I was writing it from the perspective of actually starting a business. So if you go through the book, you see a lot of examples. I used myself as an example, and I took my entire business through that process to, sort of hone in exactly what our vision was, what our mission was, what our business model was, building a financial model, what our marketing plan was going to be. So I used my business as an example throughout the entire process.
I was actually going to mention that another thing that made this easier for me to read and very relatable was the fact that you use yourself as the example all through the book. So we see your experience. You're very open and sharing those experiences. Now, do you find that this is something that is not common in the business space among startups? This idea of sharing the hows. Do you think that this is something that is common among startups, or it's not that common?
I would say the narrative is changing a bit. I think people are being more open because they feel like, I don't know if it's because they want to be, but I also think that people think that there's this narrative that if you're more relatable, if you're more open, then people trust you, people like you, people have more affinity towards you, towards your product or whatever it is that you're selling. So I find that now people are a bit more open, because I guess the public is more receptive to listening to and hearing from as many entrepreneurs as possible. Yeah. Whether it's a good thing or not, I don't know. But then everybody, is more open towards sharing some of their challenges. But it wasn't something that was popular at the time of writing. And it's not something that I think people still do in detail. So I'll give you an example. Grey, a fashion label, they decided to close up for some time. And when I spoke to her, I was like, listen, we need to table down what went wrong and help other people who are in your industry and who are in this same situation figure out what not to do at the time that they should not be doing it. And she was like very happy to do it. But I think that a lot of people who've been through that process are not willing to share the downs, because the downs are what really make businesses, So I think yes and no. So not in detail,
but it's starting.
But it's starting.
Okay, we'll take a short break, and when we come back from the break, we will hear from Wonu. Remember, I mentioned earlier that one of your goals is to change the narrative. So we want to talk about how much has writing, our own writing, and by our, I mean Africans writing, Startup Star is by you. You are a Nigerian woman. You're writing about businesses that are starting up here in Nigeria. Do you think the contribution of books like these are helping to change that narrative, or where the place of that? So we'll hear more from Wonu when we come back from the break. Please stay with us.
News Central TV, Africa's #1 storyteller, has come with the best of both worlds. With a combination of news app and live TV, we ensure that you keep track of the latest headlines, breaking news, and in-depth analysis from professional journalists from around the continent. Download the News Central TV app on Android and iOS and get started today. Don't forget to follow us on News Central's social media platforms. News Central, Africa First.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we're still on Literati with my guest, Wonuola Okoye, writer of Startup Star, the CEO of Big Startup Nigeria. So if you'd like to join the conversation, follow us on our social media at News Central TV, #NCLiterati. So when we were talking about the narrative, and if you think it is important to have us, and by us now we mean Africans, write these kinds of business guides, and why is it important that we need to start writing these kinds of guides?
I mean, it's absolutely important because Africa is not America. Africa is not Europe. Nigeria is not even South Africa.
Yeah.
So, a lot of the times we take concepts and ideas and things that seem to be working and have a semblance of working in the diaspora, and we try and replicate them here. But then the issue is, especially in Nigeria, because I can only speak specifically for us, we're a peculiar people. We're completely different. Our lifestyle is completely different. Things that, will appeal to some certain people will not appeal to people who are in the abroad, for example. So we need to be writing these books specifically tailored to, Nigerians or Africans, because we're not the same. When I was writing it, I had in mind the fact that I was running a business from here.
Yeah.
And you need to know how to do tax. It's not the same as if you were reading a book about how to start up a business in America, when they're talking about tax that you have no idea. That doesn't make any sense to you.
Tax requirements are different, the regulatory requirements.
Exactly.
But even the stories, because you mentioned something I think is great that is starting to happen. Even hearing not just the success stories, but even stories of the not so successful. And like you said when you were speaking to your friend, it's important for us to understand how did that happen. And from the perspective, I'm asking this now as a question, do you think that is also even helpful for entrepreneurs, startups, who, knowing that 100% success is not an attainable goal, and so hearing someone else's story of that time when it didn't quite work out also helps you feel like, okay, and eventually this is how the story went.
I know that it's easier to hear the success stories. It makes you sleep better at night and think that, yes, I can be part of that, I can make it. But the truth is, not everybody is going to make it. Yeah. And it's probably more important for you to figure out why you won't make it, and then change your business model to suit, to figure out how you can make it, as opposed to just sitting down listening to all the success stories that, one, probably don't relate to you or your business, don't relate to your locality, don't relate to, Nigeria or Africa on the whole. So it's very important that people tell those, bad stories, stories of how their business went belly up and why it went belly up, so that you know what not to do. Because we have enough of information about what we should do. We do. We're fine. So we need to figure out what we should not be doing so that we can avoid that and learn. Wisdom comes from learning from other people's mistakes. So it's very important that you learn from those people. But we don't want, what we want, or what I would like, is if people will stop sugarcoating and stop acting like it's normal, it's fine. Before I started running a business, I had no idea that it was going to be the struggle.
And that's something you do in the book. You kind of strip away
Yes.
any pretense of this is anything other than it is. I mean, you kind of make it very brutally clear that there are some things. In fact, one of the first chapters is the legalese of it. You go into the brutal honesty about why you have to have a business plan. Why is it necessary to strip away all pretenses and talk honestly about what we need to do for businesses here?
I think it's easier for me to say it because I've had failed businesses. So I'm either super jaded or I'm just like less emotionally attached to ideas and to businesses. I'm more about, look, what do the numbers say? How does it look? Do people want this product? Like, are you just doing it because it looks nice or it sounds nice or because somebody else is doing it in the abroad? So you need to be very honest with yourself if you're going to be successful in business. You need to ask yourself the hard questions. You need to not avoid people who you don't want to hear their opinion, because their opinion is more than likely, going to help in a way. We're not saying be discouraged or don't do business. By all means, do it. But then always have, know the risks and figure out how to mitigate them, as opposed to just, burying your head in the sand like an ostrich and, hoping that it won't happen.
We'll come back to this book in a second, but then the other thing that we happen to know about you is that you are an avid reader, and not of nonfiction now, of fiction. So tell us your take on the African literature space, nonfiction wise.
When I first moved to Nigeria, I started a book club.
Ooh.
I really did. I actually always forget about, it's like another life. I'm actually really old.
So you started a book club. Tell us about that.
A book club, and the book club was specifically for Nigerian authors. So we only read Nigerian authors. So what, yesterday when you were showing me, have you read Helen Habila? I was like, I know Helen Habila. Did you read Baba Segi? I was like, I read this book years ago. When I first moved back to Nigeria, we did so many reading on Nigerian authors, and at the point I was like, I'm never going to read anything else, because our stories are so rich, our stories are so relatable. I can't remember the name of this book that I read. It was like an alternate universe in Nigeria where everybody was intermarried, so people had you'd be like Shola, Okoye, and everybody had like intertribal names, and it was such an amazing.
I wish you could remember the name so that we could get that book and get the author on the.
I'll get it for you. But it was such an amazing book. Like, it was like super futuristic, but it was just so cool. And I just decided, look, we have so much. We have so many stories to tell. What's this girl's name? This girl, Tomi Adeyemi.
Oh, yes. That's just
Children
of Blood and Bones. Yes.
Who's all the rage now because she's telling a very authentic African story. And when you read the book, you're like, oh, wow, she's talking about Ibadan, she's talking about Orisha. These are things that we're like, oh, we don't talk about these things. But then somebody actually went and wrote beautiful and told beautiful stories about our African history, our African heritage. And I just think it's amazing. I love African books. I love Nigerian books, to be specific. So
if I had to force you to name your top five authors, would you be willing to do that?
Nigerian authors?
Nigerian, African, I would be.
If I can remember.
I hope you won't start a fight by missing out anyone's name.
That's always the last name.
Okay, let's do this instead. Instead of naming the five of them, because I know the people you don't name, number 6 to 10, will come and fight you afterwards. Tell us when you're going to write your own nonfiction.
Wow, not put me on
I
the spot
know. I know. Here we go. Tell us.
No, okay, so it's probably not going to be nonfiction. My second book that I'm actually working on it's basically about women's stories. So basically telling business stories from the women's perspective. And so what I want it to be is a book of, say a Tara, for example. She's going to tell you the story of how she started her business, everything that went belly up, everything that she did right, everything that she did wrong, just telling you the actual narrative of her business from a very, very, bare strip, look, this is me, this is the honest truth way. Because I really think that it's very important for women especially to learn from other women. And I just hope that people can be as honest as they can about their business struggles, their business highs, their business lows, so that people know that, one, they're not alone, it's not impossible. And, it may be hard, but you will get through it as long as you persevere.
So when any timelines, or that's still very much, because the
just
fact that we're seeing you around means you've not shut down, and you had to shut down to birth this. So does that mean that we're waiting for a longer period? And what's the process like? Are you curating? Are you having these women write their own stories? Are they telling you the stories?
So what I want to do is to interview them and then rewrite it. Because I think the thing is, people are not going to have time to sit down and write their stories. So I want to interview them on the dictaphone and then just listen to everything that they say and then put it down and send it to them to approve. And I'm going to have it out.
One other thing that's been your passion for the whole time we've known you is women, and women particularly in business. And like I said earlier, you are a representative of a group that we know that the numbers are very small. That's women in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. You have that as a background. Another area where we have seemingly a very low percentage of women active in business. You represent that group as well. So you happen to be a success story, so to speak. Has that driven your, I don't want to use the word activism because that's associated with a lot. Has that driven your passion for focusing on women-related businesses and stories and narratives in the work that you do?
I mean, I think from the perspective of a woman, a wife, a mother, our lives are so totally different from the man. And I think that a lot of times people don't tell our stories. People don't know our struggles. We don't even know our struggles. So we don't even share our struggles with ourselves. We're just about to start doing that. So because I remember being married, like my first couple of years of being married, and I was thinking, what the hell did I do? Like, why am I here? And then when you now have children, you're like, oh my God, who are these monsters? Like, I don't even like them. Like, what did I do? So
I hope they're not watching. That was then.
So a lot of these stories, and then you tell someone like, oh my God, like this is how I feel, and they're like, oh yeah, that's normal. You're like, okay, but nobody told me, and nobody said it was okay. There's so many, taboos and things that people don't talk about, and I just really think that women need to be more vocal about how they feel and not even care. Just express yourself. It doesn't matter. You're probably going to feel better when you do. I think that women are underrepresented. I find that apparently, like in VCs, for example, a lot of women are in tech, but only they get 95% applications from men and 5% from women. I was like, are you kidding me? There's so many women who are in tech who are doing great, but we as women, we tend to second guess ourselves. If we don't feel 100% qualified, we won't go for it. We'll be like, well, if I'm not going to be 100%, there's no point. But whereas men, they're like 30% qualified for the job, and they're like, we can't do it now.
We can't make it. It's great talking to you about this, and we'll talk more about it. The takeaway I'm getting from talking with you is the importance of sharing our stories. And we'll talk more about this. We'll take a quick break. When we come back from the break, we'll talk briefly a little bit more about the importance of sharing our stories and why that's particularly important for women. And then we'll have a quick flash review. I'll tell you more about that when we come back from the break.
News Central TV, Africa's #1 storyteller, has come with the best of both worlds. With a combination of news app and live TV, we ensure that you keep track of the latest headlines, breaking news, and in-depth analysis from professional journalists from around the continent. Download the News Central TV app on Android and iOS and get started today. Don't forget to follow us on News Central's social media platforms. News Central, Africa First.
Welcome back to Literati. I'm Joseph, and I still have with me the lovely Wonuola Okoye. We've been talking about her book, Startup Star, and her experience in the business space, the new book that we're waiting for to hear from and to read in a little bit. What I'm getting from the discussions with you is the importance of sharing our stories, and more so even for women, sharing your stories. Why is this the key thing? Because it seems like in changing the narratives which you're trying to do in business in Nigeria, you're saying that the key thing that must happen is that more women need to share their stories.
So ordinarily we work in silos. You know, everybody's like, you know, my house is my government. You know, everybody's like, it doesn't really matter what else is happening outside, as long as inside my house is fine, I'm not really worried. But then that's not how we're meant to live as a society. That's not how we're going to grow as a society, as a people. And I think that it's very important for women, especially because it can be very, very isolating. And it's a very isolated thing, like running a business where you feel like you're alone, especially if you have no co-founders. You're alone, nobody understands your struggles. And you know, it's always a thing of, are you the first? I don't get like, what's wrong with you? Do you know, that kind of thing? So it's very good for people to know that, one, that they're not alone. Two, they don't need to work in a silo. Like my biggest thing, I'm always telling people that I'm the champion delegator. You think that I'm busy, I'm really never that busy. And I'm not busy because, one, I'm very good at managing my time. I'm very, very specific about how I spend every moment of my life. And I only do the things that I want to do and things that are good and are working towards, you know, the future that I want to have. The second thing that I think is very important is to be able to delegate. I don't think it's a good use of your time, spending time doing things that, one, you're not good at, two, you have absolutely no information about, and somebody who's, you know, really good will be happy to do it for a little bit of money. So it's very important to also delegate to other people and not put that stress on yourself, because I find that we women, we're very self-sufficient. You know, any small thing, we're like, we move movements.
We add it.
You know, we're like, we'll take it, we can do things ourselves, but a lot of the times, you know, so you can sleep better, it's better for you to let other people, you know, empower other people and let them do what they're good at. And that way everybody, you know, works in a nice, happy circle of flow, instead of working in a silo where you think that, oh, you know, I can't share this with someone because, one, they'll steal my idea. Ideas are a dime a dozen. Nothing belongs to anybody, you know, by all means, you know what I mean? So yeah, that's what I do.
So now, before we go, we have this, we call it the flash review. We have a writer, you, we have their book, Startup Star. So when we're ready, you're going to do a quick 1-minute review, like a promotion synopsis. You're going to be talking to the camera. So the readers get that 1-minute review of your book. You get it? And you have 1 minute and that's it. However, you're going to pick a number from 1 to 10. The number you pick will determine the guiding rule for your 60 seconds. So
I hope it's not something like sing through.
It could be. That is one of the options.
Now I'm worried.
Okay, so just pick
0. Okay, 6. I still pick 6.
6. Let me see. Okay, good. 6 says you have to use the name of action movies in your review. I'll take that again. You have to use the names of action movies in your review. Ready?
As what?
Your time is almost starting. Ready? Are you ready?
Okay.
And time starts now. Go, hit it.
The Terminator, right, you know, was walking down the street one day and saw this book, which was really amazing, and thought, oh, wow, Black Hawk Down. And then he was like, okay, I picked up this book and it says, this is how you're going to start a business in Nigeria. Hello, this book is called The Startup Star, and it takes you through the process of how to build a successful business in Nigeria. Now, if, for example, you like Tropical Thunder, and Tropical Thunder is like super all of this is in here. This is such pants.
7,
but yeah. Buy this book because it's really amazing and you will learn a lot.
Excellent job, excellent job. Wonu, thank you so much for being with us on the show. And that was a fantastic review.
Yes.
If you haven't read Startup Star yet, rush out and get it. It's available at bookstores all across Nigeria, and you can send Wonu a message on social media and we could get a copy out to you as well. Thank you so much for being with us. And to our viewers, thank you so much for being with us on today's edition of Literati. Until next time, stay reading.